Good morning, gardeners, and welcome to Tuesday, July 18th. My name is Catherine, and I created a show called Good Morning Gardeners, even though I can't grow green things because I am referring to gardening metaphorically. We're planting the seeds for a better day. We're starting our morning by getting in the right mindset to cultivate a better life for ourselves, better communities, and a better world. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you'd like to add Good Morning Gardeners to your morning routine. I do my best to wake you up with positive and mentally stimulating ideas, but sometimes I do miss things. If you have something to add to the ideas I discussed today, please chime in the comments section below. Just a heads up, I will be on vacation starting July 24th, and I will be back with you again on August 1st. During this time, I won't be posting new videos or responding to comments, but feel free to go back and watch any old videos you haven't seen yet to maintain this part of your morning routine. And if you want to comment on any of those old videos, I will read all your comments when I return. Today's daily Stoic reading, titled Don't Abandon Others or Yourself, begins with a quote from Marcus Aurelius. My reasoned choice is as indifferent to the reasoned choice of my neighbor as to his breath and body. However much we've been made for cooperation, the ruling reason in each of us is master of its own affairs. If this weren't the case, the evil in someone else could become my harm, and God didn't mean for someone else to control my misfortune. The authors add, the foundation of a free country is that your freedom to swing your fist ends where someone else's nose begins. That is, someone else is free to do what they like until it interferes with your physical body and space. This saying can work as a great personal philosophy as well. But living that way will require two important assumptions. First, you ought to live your own life in such a way that it doesn't negatively impose on others. Second, you have to be open-minded and accepting enough to let others do the same. Can you do that, even when you really disagree with the choices that they're making? Can you understand that their life is their business and yours is your own? And that you've got plenty to wrestle with yourself without bothering anyone else. So I've been talking a lot about community and human connection on this show recently, even going so far as to assert that most of us are too focused on individualism. But I'm grateful for this morning's daily Stoic reading because I do think it's important not to leave individualism behind when you are rebalancing towards community. This morning, I'm thinking of individualism and community as two flavors that perfectly complement each other, like sweet and salty, for example. You don't want too much of either flavor, or the other will be overpowered or even lost. I think harnessing our collective power through community and cooperation is one of humanity's most effective ways to get things done. But you can't operate within a collective without maintaining healthy boundaries. Otherwise, the collective will rob you of your individuality and one of the most valuable assets that you bring to the team. Your own unique traits, abilities, and perspective will be lost. Also, on a personal note, I think having your personality being overrun, suppressed, or dominated by another person or group of people is one of the most miserable states of existence ever. I've spoken multiple times on this show before about how I grew up in an overbearing religious environment, and I attribute the way that I felt so trapped and suppressed in this environment to my lifelong value and personal emphasis on freedom. And of course, you can't have freedom without healthy boundaries. So this morning, I am going to read from the book that I always think of when I think of personal boundaries, Badass Habits by Jen Sincero. Now, while most of this book is dedicated to developing good habits, Jen dedicates the second chapter of the book to a really hefty chapter on personal boundaries. So I'm going to read a few selections from this chapter this morning, but just note that there is a lot more to be said on this topic. So if you would like to get your own copy of this book, I will leave a link in the comment section below. And if you guys would like me to revisit this topic for a future episode, let me know. So Jen Sincero writes, personal boundaries define where you are. No, that's not what she wrote. She writes, personal boundaries define where you end and where the outside world begins. Having healthy boundaries means owning your actions, emotions, and needs, as well as not owning the actions, emotions, and needs of others. You are responsible to other people. You are not responsible for other people. Big diff. Just as our skin is the boundary that defines our physical bodies, the walls of our homes define our living spaces, and 15 items or less at the grocery store means 15 items, people, not 20. We have personal boundaries that need to be clearly defined and respected as well. For example, we need to be able to decline invitations we don't want to accept, to confront people who make comments that cause us discomfort, and to tell our boss to stop parking in our parking spot already. We need to ask for help when we need it, to lose the expectation that other people will fix our problems, and to quit bailing out our financially irresponsible sister every time she goes on a shopping bender and can't afford her rent. If we don't set our own clear and healthy boundaries, we spill out and become messy, murky blobs, intertwining our needs, roles, and identities with those of the people around us. Healthy boundaries are especially critical when it comes to creating new habits because in order to stay the course, you can't afford to have your time structured by outside forces, your beliefs swayed by naysayers, or your attention consumed by your often unconscious need to control those around you. Your guilt, shame, and shoulds cannot run the show. Habitually setting good boundaries lays the groundwork for all other habits. If you're developing the habit of becoming a better manager at work, for example, you need to create solid boundaries by articulating your expectations, laying down clear guidelines, allowing your employees the space to flourish without hovering over them and micromanaging, and being neither a friend nor a tyrant to those you manage. If you're getting into the habit of not eating meat, you need to ask your friends to meet at restaurants with good vegetarian options. Take time to learn new meat-free recipes and inform unamused dinner party hosts that you don't eat animals. If you're going to regularly do Tai Chi, you need to give yourself all the time you need to honor your practice. You need to surround yourself with encouraging people to develop the dedication to keep showing up. And you need to focus on yourself and your craft so you can move in slow motion without falling over or asleep. Your habits define who you're being. Your boundaries define the space you require in order to be who you're being. Whether or not we're aware of it, we are always making choices about setting healthy boundaries, setting unhealthy boundaries, or setting no boundaries at all. Depending on our upbringing, how evolved we are, the situation, and how many cocktails we've had, we either stand up for our needs and the needs of others, or we throw our and everyone else's needs under the bus. We've all got countless cringeworthy stories and creative ways in which we've dropped the ball, but for the most part, our boundary issues fall into one of three categories. So here are the three common types of boundary bunglery. Number 1, too yesy. We say yes to everything because we want to avoid confrontations, disappointing others, appearing selfish, or missing out on the chance to feel needed and important. Number 2, too much no. We say no to everything for fear of being seen, disappointed, disappointing, judged, inadequate, needy, or hurt. We put up a wall to hide behind as opposed to creating a boundary that allows us to fully flourish. Number 3, too control-y. We try to control other people, get them to take on our problems and or become overly involved with their problems. We seek out those who will enable us and or become enablers ourselves because we don't want to fix our own lives. We want to feel in control, needed, loved, and not alone. Most of us participate in a bit of all these behaviors to some degree, depending on our issues, the circumstances, and who happens to be the lucky navigator of our bad boundaries at the moment. For example, we may say yes to all the things that our boss asks us to do that are outside our job description to the point of exhaustion and resentment. We may say no to invitations to parties and blind dates to avoid awkwardness and rejection. And we may be control-y with our kids by getting involved in areas of their lives that are none of our business. For example, I got rid of those black clunky boots that you've worn to death and got you something a little more feminine. One of the premier causes of unnecessary drama is bad boundaries. So if you feel comfortable with it, let me know in the comments which of the 3 common types of boundary bunglery you struggle with the most. Too yesy, too many no's, and too controlly. Personally, I feel like I tend to flip-flop between too yesy and too much no. Wanting to make others happy, I'll go through a period of time when I say yes to everything, and then I will get burned out and flip all the switches to no. It's been really hard for me to figure out what I want to say yes to and what I really want to say no to. I'm not going to read it to you this morning, but Jen Sincero also describes how our relationship with personal boundaries forms during childhood. So if my trouble with not knowing whether I want to say yes or no sounds crazy to you, I'm guessing healthy boundaries were modeled, at least at some point for you, during your childhood. But if you can relate, you may have grown up with parents like mine who were constantly trampling on the space where your personal boundaries should have been. As I've shared in a previous video, I believe that we can change the beliefs, trauma, and behavior patterns we got from our childhood, but it is definitely a process. For our feel-good moment today, I'm going to share with you yet another section of Jen's chapter on boundaries. This section resonates particularly strongly with me because I tend to feel guilty when setting or enforcing a personal boundary. So Jen writes, "Having bad boundaries doesn't make us bad people. It just makes us regular old people who are trying to avoid feeling pain and isolation by behaving in ways that ultimately cause us to feel the very pain and isolation we're trying to avoid. Joke's on us. The excellent news is that you simply need to become aware of where and when your boundaries aren't so great, make the conscious decision to upgrade them, regardless of how uncomfortable and or scary it may be, and take back some control of your own life. Take back some control. Ain't nobody ever going to be perfect or completely in control of anything, but we can certainly improve the quality of our lives by getting better at making smarter choices. Here's where we get confused when it comes to boundaries. We want to be nice, to bring joy to others, to be good, helpful, agreeable, compassionate, popular people, and we think that compromising our boundaries is the best way to meet the most needs. We mistakenly perceive boundaries to be bad, mean, unbending barriers that keep others out. We fear that setting a boundary means we're cutting ourselves off from others, delivering an ultimatum, putting up a wall, being demanding, controlling, rigid, and worst of all, selfish. Meanwhile, clearly defining who you are and what you're available for isn't selfish, but rather it's self-ish. For example, telling your teenagers that they are unauthorized to disturb you unless it involves the police during the 30 minutes you've set aside to read and meditate every afternoon is indeed self-serving, but it also benefits your kids. By setting a boundary and taking time for yourself, your children not only get a more relaxed, attentive mother who values herself, but also an excellent model for how to set good boundaries themselves, and much-needed practice respecting the boundaries of others. Think about what a relief it is when someone tells you exactly what's on their mind, what they need, and what they're available for. Even if the boundary they set isn't the most convenient or beneficial to your own needs, knowing where they stand beats the hell out of trying to read their mind, walking around on eggshells, or trying to figure out if their evening performance of slamming drawers and silently moving their mashed potatoes around on their plate is about something you did, or if it's not even about you at all. Good, clear boundaries are a gift to everyone. Resentment, exhaustion, guilt, obligation, and passive-aggressiveness are gifts to no one. Later in the chapter, Jen also explains that when you say no to the needs of others, you're being nice to yourself, not mean to them. And that is something that I really need to bear in mind more. So if you can relate to the struggles that I go through with feeling selfish, I hope that you let that reminder really sink in for you this morning. When you say no to the needs of others, you are being nice to yourself, not mean to them. So our focus moment this morning is going to be a bit different. Instead of offering you my own focus prompt, I'm going to read even more from Badass Habits. This is the part of the boundaries chapter where Jen lists some common areas where boundaries come into play and some examples to help spark self-reflection. So the first example where people can struggle with boundaries is what Jen calls the bod, your body. If you don't like being touched by strangers and a yoga teacher comes over to adjust your pose, do you ask her to please stop? Do you move away? Do you slap her on the wrist? Or do you say nothing and hope she backs off soon? What are your boundaries when it comes to sex, the food you eat, the exercise you do, the clothes you wear, and the conversations you have about your body and bodies in general? How do you respond to people who say hello by kissing you on the lips? And are you one of them? How aware are you of other people's body language? Do you automatically go in for the hug when you meet someone, or do you tune into what they're up for first? Do you raise a disapproving eyebrow when your daughter, whom you consider to be overweight, helps herself to a second donut? Do you encourage her to eat the donut? Do you make fun of her? Do you leave her alone? Do you even notice? Second area is stuff. Which of your possessions are off limits to others, and which do you share freely? Are you tidy or messy in your own home? And how do you behave in the homes of others? Do you live by the old adage, ask for forgiveness, not for permission, and help yourself to the apples on your neighbor's apple tree, the clothes in your sister's closet, office supplies from the storage room at work, or your spouse's toothbrush when you accidentally leave yours behind on a trip? How would you respond, if at all, if the tables were turned and people didn't ask for permission from you? 3. Beliefs. Are your beliefs easily swayed by the beliefs of the people around you or by the media? Are you fairly solid on your beliefs, yet still open to hearing another point of view? Do you think people who disagree with you are morons, or that they're smarter than you, or that they're just different from you? Do you question your beliefs or the beliefs of others? Is it important to you that in every confrontation someone is right and someone is wrong? Or can you hold space for the possibility that there may be more than one right answer? Will you fight to the death to be right about the fact that it was your husband, not you, who left the car window open in the rainstorm last week, even though you're actually not so sure it wasn't you now that you think about it? Can you admit when you're wrong? Do you need everyone within shouting distance to know you were right when you're right? Do you refuse to hear anyone out and never consider the other side of things? Does anyone actually admit to any of this? Number 4, behavior. Do you go with the flow and behave however you feel in the moment, oblivious to how it affects others? Do you limit your behavior, constantly apologize, shrink down, and speak in a barely audible whisper so as not to make waves or disturb others? Do you take a stand if someone is being inconsiderate, bullying, making racist jokes, or talking loudly during a movie? Or do you stay silent or complain about them behind their backs? Do you foist unsolicited ideas, books, fashion suggestions, job opportunities, and blind dates on others because you see such potential in them? How do you respond, if at all, to unsolicited advice, rude remarks, a helping hand? Do you try to do everything yourself? Do you try to get others to do everything for you? Do you blame other people, society, or your parents for your boring job, your terrible taste in partners, your empty bank account, your fear of flying? Do you communicate clearly, drop hints, think before you speak, blurt it out, or hold it in until you explode or grow a tumor? Number 5, space. Are you a bed hog or a road hog? Do you sit with your legs spread wide apart on a crowded subway? What do you do, if anything, when confronted with people who are and do? Do you sit with barely even one cheek on the couch to take up less room? Are you aware of the space you take up? Do you give yourself and others room to work, room to think, room to create, room to feel? Do you guard your privacy and respect the privacy of others? Emotions. Do you empathize with others, over-empathize with others, and take on their pain as your own? Or do you feel nothing when it ain't your problem? Do you have screaming matches in airports with the ticket agent who can't find your reservation? Do you calmly discuss the problem, or do you burst into tears of frustration? Do you bottle up your feelings, share them with only those closest to you, or try not to feel them at all? Do you act impulsively on how you feel, or let your emotions run their course before making a decision? And how do you respond, if at all, to people who process differently than you? Do you adjust your behavior if someone around you is in a bad mood, a good mood, a sad mood, and or do you expect everyone to meet you where you are at emotionally? Are you aware of other people's moods? Do you try to fix other people's moods? Time. Do you respect your time and others by being punctual? Do you refuse to suffer those who waste your time? Do you take the time to read your neighbor's entire book about the local flora and fauna against your will, or do you tell her you're too busy? Do you take guilt-free alone time for yourself? Do you complain that you can't find the time to do what you want to do? Do you make time? Do you waste time? Availability. Do you make yourself available for intimacy, friendships, success, and fun? Do you make yourself available for verbal abuse, negative energy, toxic relationships, the unappealing whims of others? Do you listen to your friend complain about her job for the 500th time, or do you tell her you can't hear it anymore and to get her act together and tell someone else? Do you let people you don't like into your life, home, book group because you don't want them to feel bad or make a scene? Are you more available for the needs of others than for your own needs? Are you aware of the needs of others? And lastly, energy. Do you eat food, listen to music, participate in activities, hang out with people who give you energy or deplete your energy? Do you disengage from people and activities that drain you, or do you suck it up and power through, or find some happy medium? Do you pay attention to who and what affects your energy? What do you bring to the party in the energy department? So I know that that was a lot for our focus moment, and our focus moments are usually much shorter, but I wanted to read all of those questions to you this morning because I think that they really illustrate how overarching and extensive problems with boundaries can be. And it's really hard, to come up with just a one focus prompt that would be relevant for everyone, because as you can see, there are so many different ways that boundary issues can crop up, and probably, as Jen says, we all deal with some combination, at least at some point in our life. Even, it seems to me, even the healthiest people most likely struggle with boundaries sometimes. However, I would urge you to just intuitively let any of that, whichever one of those questions really hit you the hardest, to let those roll around in your brain this morning. There's no need to go through every question one by one and answer them for yourself, unless you were doing that as I was reading. But as for what you take away from this episode this morning, it's totally okay for you just to take away one thing, the one boundary problem that is really standing out for you this morning. I hope you found this helpful, and I hope you have a wonderful day. I will speak with you again tomorrow.